Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dr. Prasad has just stolen my thunder because I too wanted to begin by acknowledging in particular the leadership of Katrina Shanks as the Chair of the Social Services Committee in the last Parliament, and also the very important work that was done by our colleague, the Honourable Chester Burrows, whose knowledge in these areas is perhaps as great as any in this Parliament, and who brings a huge amount of life and professional experience to it. So, as my colleague Pesitar Sam Lotoenga, the new chair of the committee, has acknowledged, this was a report that straddled two parliaments and two social services committee, and I think all of us who have had the opportunity to be a part of it have found it both a challenging but also a very rewarding exercise. So I want to acknowledge the fact that there are some members, and Dr. Prasad is one, Sue Williams-Sear, Jacinda Ardern and I are all members who worked on the report in the previous committee, were able to do the work that went to it, and I want to thank the members of this current committee in the 50th Parliament for picking it up and bringing it through to the point where it can be presented to the House, discussed here this morning, and most importantly that the lessons that we can draw from it are made available to all the agencies in order to be implemented wherever possible. Mr. Speaker, it is a very important topic. It's one of the issues that really pushes all the buttons for me as a Member of Parliament. It's one of the main reasons why I felt it was so purposeful to come here, in order to try to assist our society to intervene effectively with young people who are at risk not only of going off the rails, but in many cases of getting into a serious lifetime of crime, drug addiction and all sorts of other terrible social evils that are so devastating for them, but always devastating for the wider communities in which they live. Mr. Speaker, children in the bracket we're talking about, the ages 10 to 14, are probably at greater risk in our society today than ever before. That's simply because we are seeing more and more family breakdown, more and more intergenerational welfare dependency, more and more children struggling with literacy and numeracy, which means that they don't achieve what they need to in education in order to be able to set their sights on the pathway forward. Many of them have known no other sort of lifestyle than the one that is leading them on the path to ruin. And so a report of this type is very timely, is very important, and I'm hopeful that it will lead to some really effective forms of intervention, because, as Dr. Prasad has just said, the notion of early intervention is a really important one from the report. We all know, I'm sure, that the earlier we can intervene in the lives of these youth at risk, the greater the likelihood is that we'll be able to help them to turn their lives around. Others have spoken in this debate this morning about the need to identify the youth at risk of becoming child offenders, and that, of course, is absolutely critical. But I do also want to acknowledge that there are many people out in our communities doing great work in this area. We have outstanding teachers, many of whom would be able to tell you very quickly what the problems are, who those at risk are. Equally, we have social workers up and down the country doing outstanding work, and in both of those particular professions, the challenges are often considerable. I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge them this morning and thank them all for the vital work that they're doing. But, Mr. Speaker, it's the interventions and in particular the rehabilitative programs that are most significant if we're going to turn things around. And so I do just want to highlight Chapter 3 of the report, which commences on page 21, to say that as a committee we acknowledge that to some extent the jury is still out about a definitive view of the effectiveness of the programs that are on offer. To be valid, each assessment would require comprehensive evaluation over an extended period. And there are people doing that work. We'll be monitoring them closely. I want to acknowledge child, youth and family, who are a vital part of this package. They stress the need for us agencies to work together. That's another theme that I'm really very keen on, and we saw some good example of the way things are moving in this direction. Mr. Speaker, we had an opportunity to visit a number of remand centres, youth offending teams and the like, both in Australia during our trip and also around the country. I'd just like to finish by praising the efforts of one very close to home, my own doorstep of Hamilton, has the Corey Centre. It's an outstanding facility, working with some young people who are outside the mainstream education system for various reasons. They're not able to be in our usual state schools. And the Corey Centre is working with these young people. Every time I go there, I'm really inspired by the work they're doing, hugely impressed by the commitment of the teachers and the adults who are working there. And I have to say, they are delightful young people. Their lives are in many cases in a bit of a mess, but there's hope there for them. And I want to conclude by saying that every one of those young lives that we can turn around, turn back from the path to ruin onto a path for hope and aspiration and achievement, is good for them, good for their families and good for our country.
Mike Sabin.